Three women, one night, gone. No struggle, no note, no trace, just nothing. In Springfield, Missouri, in the summer of 1992, three women vanished from inside a locked house on a quiet street while the rest of the city slept. No one heard a sound. No one saw a thing. And more than 30 years later, we still don't know why. We still don't know how. We still don't know who. This is the story of Cheryl Levitt, of Susie Streeter, of Stacy McCall. This is the story of the Springfield Three, June 6th, 1992, a Saturday, graduation day. At the Hammond Student Center in Springfield, hundreds of students filed across a stage in caps and gowns. Among them, two best friends. Suzanne Streeter, 19 years old. Everyone called her Susie. She was bright, social, close to her mother. And next to her, Stacy McCall, 18. Quiet where Susie was loud, steady where Susie was restless. The two had been inseparable. Today was the day they'd been waiting for, graduation, the first day of the rest of their lives. That afternoon, they celebrated with friends. They moved from party to party, the way teenagers do on a night like that. Back home, Susie's mother was waiting. Cheryl Levitt, 47 years old, cosmetologist, single mother. She had a doctor's appointment the following Monday. A normal week stretched ahead. No plans to go anywhere. No reason to. She was exactly where she was supposed to be, at home, at 1717 East Delmar Street. That evening, just after 11:15, Cheryl was heard from for the last time. A phone call, a voice, then silence. The night moved on. The parties wound down. Around 2:15 in the morning, Susie and Stacy made a decision. The house they'd planned to sleep at was too crowded, too loud, so they drove to Susie's place, to her mother's house, to Delmar Street. They arrived sometime around 2:15, maybe slightly after. They were seen leaving the party. They were not seen again. Not alive, not by anyone who came forward. Whatever happened next happened between 2:15 in the morning and the time the sun came up, a window of roughly 5 hours, no witnesses, no calls, no sound, 5 hours, and then nothing. The next morning, friends arrived at the house to pick up Susie and Stacy for their water park trip. The door was unlocked. They went inside. No one was home. They looked around. Cheryl's bed appeared slept in. The car was still in the driveway. Purses on the counter, wallets, keys, medicine, cigarettes, everything left behind. The family dog, Cinnamon, was still there. And then someone noticed the porch light. The globe was shattered, broken on the ground, just outside the front door. That was it. That was the only sign. The only sign that anything had gone wrong at all. Stacy's mother, Janice McCall, did not call 911. She called the police on the non-emergency line because it didn't feel like an emergency yet, because women don't just vanish. When officers arrived, friends were already inside, family had gathered, people were coming and going. Police talked to a few of them. Then they left a note on the front door telling the women to call when they got home. And then everyone left. The house was not taped off. It was not secured. It was not treated as a crime scene. Not yet. By the time investigators returned with criminal intent, 10 to 20 people had already been inside, cleaning up, tidying, emptying ashtrays, washing coffee cups. The physical evidence was gone. The fingerprints, the trace materials, the hair, gone. And then something else was lost. A message on the answering machine. Police believed it may have been a clue. It was accidentally erased before anyone could listen to it. Gone irretrievably. One detective would later say the first thing he noticed when he arrived was the people in the yard, through the windows, coming and going, a crime scene already contaminated before anyone called it a crime. While the family waited that day, the phone rang. Janice McCall answered. The caller said nothing meaningful. What he said was obscene, sexual, lewd. She hung up. The phone rang again. Same voice, same content. She hung up again. A third call, same caller. 3 obscene phone calls to the home of 3 missing women on the day they were reported missing. The calls were never traced. They were never linked to the case. They were never explained. They were never ruled out. They just sit there in the record, unanswered. By June 9th, the FBI had joined the investigation. 2 days after the disappearance, the Bureau built a profile, one person. That was the conclusion. One person likely did this, probably male, familiar with the Springfield area, possibly owned, or had access to a larger vehicle, a van, most likely. And this person was not a stranger to control, someone capable of subduing 3 women without a struggle, without a scream, without a single neighbor waking up. The profile also said something quietly chilling, that people who knew this man probably would not believe he was capable of such a thing. Someone ordinary, someone familiar, someone already trusted. June 14th, 1 week after the disappearance, volunteers and officials began searching wooded areas outside Springfield. They found nothing. That summer and into the fall, tips came in, hundreds of them, then thousands. Investigators chased each one, and each one led nowhere. Then on December 31st, 1992, 6 months after the women vanished, a man called the America's Most Wanted hotline. He said he had information, critical information, about the disappearances. The switchboard operator tried to connect the call directly to Springfield investigators. The line dropped, the call disconnected. Police went public immediately. They said this man had, quote, prime knowledge of the abductions. They appealed for him to call back. He never did. That call was never traced. That man was never identified. That knowledge remains unrevealed. Let's talk about the first person who came under serious scrutiny, Robert Craig Cox. In 1992, Cox was living in the Springfield area. He worked at an auto dealership, the same one where Stacy McCall's father worked. He had Army Ranger training, the kind of training that teaches a person how to move quietly, how to control a situation, how to restrain someone without leaving marks. When police asked him where he was the night the women disappeared, he gave them an alibi. He was at church with his girlfriend that morning. She confirmed it. Case closed, except it wasn't, because later his girlfriend recanted. She admitted that Cox had asked her to say that. He had fabricated the alibi. Cox's response was to offer a second alibi. He was at his parents' house the night of the disappearance. His parents confirmed it. Both alibis can't be true. One of them is a lie, possibly both. But here's what makes Cox impossible to dismiss. In 1997, 5 years after the women disappeared, Cox was in prison in Texas, convicted of armed robbery, convicted of kidnapping, and he started talking to journalists. He told them he knew the 3 women were dead. He told them their bodies would never be recovered. He said he would reveal what really happened, but only after his mother died His mother has since passed. He has never revealed anything. He is currently serving a life sentence in Texas, and no one has ever charged him with anything related to Springfield. Investigators publicly stated they did not believe Cox had credibility, that he might simply be a manipulative man seeking notoriety. And maybe that's true, but his statements were specific, and his refusal to clear himself was deliberate. Now, let's talk about a man whose crimes were proven, Gerald Carnahan, prominent Springfield businessman, connected, known, respected in some circles. In 1985, a young woman named Jackie Johns was abducted in Greene County. She was raped, she was murdered. For over 2 decades, the case was cold. Then in 2007, DNA evidence linked Carnahan to the crime. He was convicted. He received a life sentence, but that wasn't all. In 1993, 1 year after the Springfield Three vanished, Carnahan attempted to abduct another 18-year-old woman in Greene County. He was active, he was predatory, and he was in Springfield in 1992. He was a Kickapoo High School graduate, the same school that Susie Streeter and Stacy McCall had just graduated from. He also had ties to a motorcycle gang called the Galloping Goose, and one of its members would become a central figure in the Springfield Three investigation. Springfield detectives investigated Carnahan in connection with the disappearances. They found no evidence linking him to the Delmar Street house, no physical connection. He denied any involvement, but his pattern, his geography, his victims align with disturbing precision. Opportunistic, nocturnal, young women, Springfield. That brings us to Stephen Garrison. In 1993, 1 year after the women disappeared, Garrison was convicted of rape of a college student in Springfield. He was sentenced to 40 years. But before that sentence, he talked to investigators about the Springfield Three. And what he said was enough to stop the room. He claimed a friend had confessed to him during a drunken party, claimed to have killed the three women. Garrison provided details that had not been made public, details investigators had kept quiet, details only someone with real knowledge could have known. Based on what Garrison told them, investigators obtained multiple search warrants in western Webster County. A judge issued a gag order on the search warrants. A gag order, which means a judge found enough reason to keep this information from the public. In 2002, cadaver dogs were brought to the site. They flagged 2 areas, possible locations. Then investigators quietly walked it back. They said the areas were unlikely to be connected to the disappearance. The gag order was never fully explained. Garrison's information was never publicly detailed, and he was never charged in connection to the women. But he's still in prison, and the information he gave still sits somewhere in a file that has never been fully opened to the public. There's another moment in this case that doesn't get enough attention. At some point during the investigation, Robert Cox was asked to take a lie detector test. His response, according to people close to the case, was a question. He said, "I wonder if they asked Steve the same thing." Stephen Garrison. Did Cox know Garrison? Had they met? Was that a deflection, a threat, a piece of information? Investigators never fully explained what that comment meant, and it sits there in the record like a fragment of something much larger that was never fully assembled. Now let's step back and look at something fundamental, something that doesn't get resolved no matter how many times you study this case. Susie Streeter and Stacy McCall were not supposed to be at 1717 East Delmar Street that night. That was not the plan. They changed their plans at the last minute at 2 in the morning because a friend's house was too crowded. So they drove to Susie's mother's place, a spontaneous decision made between friends at 2 in the morning on a residential street in Springfield, Missouri. And somehow someone was there, or someone followed them, or someone was already waiting. If this was a planned abduction targeting Cheryl Levitt, why were three women taken instead of one? If this was a targeted attack on Susie because of something she knew or something she'd done, how did the attacker know where she would be on a night when she herself didn't know? And if this was random, if this was an opportunist who spotted Susie's red car with its personalized plate and followed two teenagers home at 2 in the morning, then this person successfully abducted three women from inside a house without a single sound, without a single scream, and disposed of three bodies without leaving a single trace of any of them. 34 years later, not one bone, not one fiber, not one confirmed piece of physical evidence connecting anyone to that house. In 2007, a new lead emerged. A tip came in. The women were buried beneath the south parking garage of Cox Medical Center in Springfield. A mechanical engineer used ground penetrating radar to scan a section of the garage floor. He found three anomalies, three roughly the same size, in an orientation consistent with a grave site. Police acknowledged the anomalies, that they noted that the parking garage was built in September 1993, more than a year after the disappearances, which would mean the women's remains were buried during construction, buried beneath concrete, beneath a major hospital. Police declined to excavate. They cited cost. They cited insufficient evidence. The tip had reportedly come from someone who claimed to be a psychic or to have had a dream. And so the garage was not opened, and the anomalies remain beneath the concrete, unconfirmed, unexplained. By 2015, investigators had compiled more than 27,000 documents, more than 5,000 tips, 3 decades of searching, of following, of waiting. In 1997, Cheryl Levitt was declared legally dead. Susie Streeter was declared legally dead. Stacy McCall's family refused to do the same. Her mother, Janice, refused to close that door, refused to stop. She became the case's most persistent voice, the one who kept showing up, the one who kept asking, the one who kept saying her daughter deserved an answer, and then silence. The case remained open. The tips kept coming, and every one of them led to the same place, nowhere. Here's what we know. A porch light was broken. 3 women left behind everything they owned. An answering machine message was erased before it could be heard. 3 obscene calls were made to the house that morning. A man called America's Most Wanted, with what police called prime knowledge of the case, and never called back. Robert Cox gave 2 contradictory alibis and told journalists the bodies would never be found. Stephen Garrison provided investigators with non-public information that triggered a judge-approved search and a court-ordered gag order. And Gerald Carnahan, convicted of abducting and murdering a young woman in Springfield just years earlier, has never been definitively ruled out. No charges, no arrests, no remains. Here's what we don't know. We don't know who broke that porch light. We don't know what was on that answering machine. We don't know who made those 3 calls. We don't know what Cox actually knows. We don't know what Garrison told investigators about who did this and where the bodies are. We don't know what is beneath that parking garage floor. We don't know if one man did this or several. We don't know if the women are still in Missouri. We don't know if anyone who could answer these questions is still alive. What we know is this: three women were here, alive, laughing, planning a trip to a water park for the next morning, and then they were gone. Taken some time in those dark hours between 2:15 and sunrise. In a window of 5 hours on a quiet street in the middle of Springfield, and the world kept moving forward without them. Cheryl Levitt, Susie Streeter, Stacy McCall, still listed as missing, still without answers, still waiting somewhere.